So I'm getting too many people let their sexual desires lead them, and they become speechless later. So try your best not to be that person, because once you get to a certain point in a relationship and you may ignore the signs or you don't pay attention to them, I mean, that's the same, but it's kind of like ignore. I feel like it's more so you see it, but you really just trying not to see it, or make sure you act as if you, it's almost like lying to yourself. It is lying to yourself. Seeing something within a person and just giving it a pass, okay? And then not paying attention is really the same thing when I think about it. But that affects so many people on so many different levels. And it's like turn that passion into power instead of using it for those desires when it comes to between the sheets activity, because those things don't last all the time. It's beautiful when they do, because I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer and act like all relationships are just horrible, because that's not true. There are some relationships that do last for a lifetime, and I heard maybe even their souls meet and dance in the stars when their time is up here. That's so beautiful. But anyway, that's just me and my poetic mind thinking. However, we've been accustomed to seeing the worst of the worst when it comes to examples of relationships, right? And when we see that, it could really change your mind as to how you view relationships and how you view marriage and your thoughts. And you can become very negative. You can become repulsed by the idea of a relationship. And it could really skew your perception. And I just feel as though that's why it's so important for us to try our very best to get to know a person for who they are prior to taking it to the next level. Because it just, if the two in this relationship are not on the same page, all types of wrong happens in the midst of this situationship. Because sometimes one person is in it thinking that it's a relationship, but never talk about it to solidify what it is that's happening in this relationship. And then because of how one is treated, they automatically think, oh, we're in a relationship. And I actually know a few masculine energies actually that will allow a feminine energy. Well, I actually know both sides do this. Masculine and feminine energy can do this, but right now I'm just thinking about the masculines that I know of that are very laid back to the point where they'll get into a relationship with a woman and just, no matter if they're the type to have multiple or not, they kind of just very free-spirited. Oh yeah, just, it's all right. I'm going to work. Just stay here, whatever. And that's cute, you know. But then when somebody doesn't want to leave, the one who was welcomed kind of moves themselves in without really discussing it, and it just kind of like happens, it can get weird. And then a baby can get involved. Then as soon as they find out, then it's either it's going to work out or it's not. But when it doesn't, it gets challenging, because once a baby is involved, it's kind of like glue. It can seem as though it's glue, even though it doesn't necessarily mean, just because there's a child involved, it doesn't mean that the relationship is going to stay together. And for those who believe that, you know, think twice about that, because just because there's a child involved doesn't mean that, you know, you're just going to stay with that person forever. And I'm sure many of you don't know that, but just in case there's some younger individuals watching me, just know that a baby doesn't keep a relationship together. It just makes things more challenging. Okay. And not that babies are hard work. But if the relationship is not strong and there's not a mutual understanding, then it's going to be much more difficult than what it could appear in the beginning. Okay, so be mindful of that. Sometimes people get together with no strings attached. One feels that way and the other one does not. And then one person forces their energy on the other person, and then it becomes a problem. And so much more happens beyond that. It's like distrust and annoyances and just aggravation, stress. Okay. Feeling overwhelmed with... There's just so many people that force themselves on another person. And the dynamics are all wrong when it gets like that. And then if there's a baby involved, then the child's going to have to deal with that as well. And then that just gets confusing for the child. So I say all this to say that be mindful when you lay down with someone, because you're either going to get with someone who's understanding, and even if it doesn't work, it'll still work. Like, you can still co-parent with them. Or you can end up with someone who is like Psycho Bob, and then they won't leave you alone, even if you're like, you know what, it's fine, you go ahead and do what you do, you know, and I'm gonna do what I do. But then the person doesn't want to leave you alone. Then you have that type. And then that's just an annoyance for the rest of your life. Then some individuals use the baby as leverage to get what they want from their ex or from the person that they're with. Some even like to be with whoever and then want to still have ties with you in between the sheets, activities, still wants to be present. Meanwhile, they are with someone else or with multiple someone else's. And then they'll try to, this is another way that they'll try to use the baby as leverage, and like, oh, you don't want me to see my child. But you see, those are the people that will act as though they're very interested in seeing the child, but once the child is around, they're more interested in their ex. And they don't give the child as much attention as they give the ex. That's toxic. And these are just dynamics that I just want you to think about, especially if you don't even have a child yet. Be very careful with who you have a child with, because when you end up getting tied to someone in that way with a child that is imbalanced, it could quickly and easily transfer to you, that imbalance, because you try to live your life and do the right thing for yourself and your child, and then you have the ex coming back and mixing things up when things were smooth and cool, you know. So I can understand that people don't want to be alone. I get it. But I feel like that's why it's so important for you to build yourself up. Work on yourself. You know, when you work on yourself and you learn new things and pick up new hobbies, new skills, you become engrossed in your growth. When you're engrossed in your growth, things change a lot. Many things change around you, because you don't think so much about being in a relationship because you're so in tune with self, and you know what could happen. You understand relationships, so you're more careful with who you allow in, especially when you're a spiritual person. You're very careful with who you allow in, because you know that if someone is not in alignment with your same values and just awareness, that it's not going to work. Because you could be doing absolutely amazing on your own, and then you let someone in, and then your whole world crumbles around you. And you don't notice until you're too far gone to just reverse, because there's no reversals after that. Once it happens, and then you have to rebuild once you get to that point. So that's why it might be challenging for many of you. And maybe what I'm saying just sounds like complete rubbish, okay? However, I'm telling you because I know. I'm telling you because I've seen it. I've been through it. I've seen it multiple times in many different ways. Okay, many stories here in my mind that I'm thinking about where people just end up with what seems like the worst person that they could have ended up with. And then they have a baby and things just turn upside down. A child is a blessing. However, it's just not an easy task to teach and care for a child. You know, it's not easy as possible, of course. No matter if you're in a relationship or if you're single, it's possible. It's just challenging. And if you're someone who you know that you don't want to give so much attention to anyone else but yourself, really think about the steps that you take when it comes to meeting someone, because instead of just moving with so much haste and just going fast and just getting into a relationship just because we want to say that we're in one, or just because some may be tired of being alone, would you rather wait patiently and get to know someone who's really in alignment with you, someone who you truly have potential to end up being with and loving for the rest of your days? Or would you rather just be in a relationship and just get stressed out and then hop into the next one and be more stressed out? Are you choosing stress over peace? When you look at relationships, what are you looking for? Is it companionship, friendship? Because you can be friends with the person that you're in love with. And I find that that's the most beautiful dynamic, when you build a very strong friendship with the one that you love, because there's a different type of respect there that you don't really get if you move too quickly and you don't even get to know the person enough to see a flag. You won't even be able to see the flag because they move so quickly that there wasn't a chance for you to see any flags, any signs to let you know if there's some type of warning that you should pay attention to. So I just want you guys to keep these things in mind, because I see it so many times, and there's so many individuals that I have in my life that have multiple children, you know, and they struggle. It's very difficult for them because the other person is not there. And it's both, like single fathers, single mothers, you know. And it's because they ended up with someone who was not in alignment with them, just because they let their eyes and in between the sheets activity guide them. And that gets you in trouble, especially if you're someone who is of a certain status. Like you're someone who does well for themselves financially. You also have to be very careful if you do well for yourself. I mean, either way, but especially when you do well financially, because you become like a target. And it sounds crazy to say that. However, there are individuals that lurk through the night and through the day, scouting out for someone who they feel or who they know has some fat pockets. And that is their only means of wanting to connect. These individuals will act like they love you so much and that they're so interested, but they're really interested in what you could do for them. They're really interested in how many zeros go after, within your bank account. That's what they really want to know. So there's no love involved. These are loveless relationships. Who wants to be in a loveless relationship? Someone has to be very desperate to actually desire that. Or not necessarily desperate. It would also be someone who's heartless. Because some people don't care. They just want what they want and they just ready to get it and be done. And they'll throw a couple dollars and be done. That's another dynamic as well. So it just really depends on the person's perspective and mindset. And again, that's why it's important to talk, communicate, be friends if you can. I know, but it's best. I'm just going to tell you that it's best. I know everybody wants to do what they want to do. We grown. Yeah, I know, but I'm just trying to save you from a perceptual point of view, save you from the heartache and pain and from the stress. Because how can you, when you go through struggles in relationships, it makes it so much difficult. It makes it so much more difficult, excuse me, for you to be able to take care of your children and yourself, because your mind is going to be bogged up with all types of thoughts. My nose is itching, don't mind me. So, be mindful, man. Once the baby's in there, you can't really get it out. I mean, you could, but we don't even want to go there. I don't want to go there. But I'm just saying, if you can prevent yourself from getting to that point when the baby arrives, or even to the point where you get your feelings hurt, there has to be some type of boundary for yourself. We have to set boundaries for ourselves, where when we see something that's just not working, or force yourself to be a certain way, even if it's if it's difficult for you, so you can really save yourself from stress. Because do you really want to be stressed out? I know that there's so many of you that are stressed out. And if you truly are tired of being stressed out, you have to be very mindful of the decisions that you're making in your own life. You can't keep going on like this, because you're going to be stressed out. If you really don't want that, be mindful of the decisions that you make and the people that you bring into your home. People have things attached to them now, okay? There's all types of entities and low frequency energy that just are ready for you to welcome them in. And as soon as you welcome them in, it just seems like everything is upside down, or there's arguments, there's discomfort, there's just trouble. And that's not what everyone. It's just important that you be careful with who you bring into your home. And be careful with who you leave your children with. Don't leave your children with just random people that you just met off the street last week. You don't know them. You don't know these people. You don't know them yet. You can't just have them around your children like that and just let them in. And then you go to work and then they stay there with your children. You don't know, what could happen, because you don't really know the person yet. It's one thing if you get to know the person, but if you don't, so many wrongs could happen. So just be mindful. Be mindful of how you move. Think about what could happen, and think about protecting yourself, your mind, and your family, especially your mind. Because if you lose your mind, you don't have anything really left. Our mind is what navigates us, really. So if you lose your mind, you basically lose everything. Okay, let's see what else. Love yourself enough to say no. I have a blue star. Right now I'm getting your emotions. Star your emotions. Star your emotions. Pay attention to how you feel. I always say this, but really pay attention to how you feel around a person, and don't ignore signs and red flags because you just want to be in a relationship with someone. Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to be in that relationship and something's going to happen to where you are unhappy. And it's just because you may have moved too quickly, or you may not have had the conversation that gives you clarity to know, what is this? What is this about? Is this, do you really want to be in a relationship, or you don't? You know, sometimes people might avoid that conversation just because they don't want to hear that the other person is not interested in a relationship. Or after the in between the sheets activity, someone could say, oh, you know, just to let you know, this is just going to be like a thing, but we're not going to be serious. And then the other person's like, what? That's another thing. So those are things that can really hurt someone who has that mindset to just be with one person. Because some people don't desire to be with multiple bodies. Some people don't desire that. Some people just are okay with just one person that they love and that they nurture. And when I say nurture, I'm talking about like intellectually feeding each other's mind, and a relationship that has true love, that is a bond. The bond is through true love. That is healthy. That's a healthy, loving, trustworthy relationship. If the relationship that you're in doesn't feel that way or isn't that way, then that is not the relationship for you, no matter how much you want it to be. So be mindful of your emotions, and be mindful if you're just trying to be in a relationship just because you're lonely, because those are the worst times to try to get into a relationship, because your energy can become very clingy. And people tend not to like the clinginess. And most of the time I feel that people that do have that clingy personality, they end up gravitating towards someone who has an aloof energy. They're very like standoffish. I find that interesting when I think about it. Maybe it's just like a craving to see, you know, that like this subconscious thing where you just want to know, like, okay, will this work, or can I get this person's attention? Or, you know, you have to be very mindful when you're in that place where you're vulnerable like that, and then you want a relationship and then you become clingy because the person that you end up falling for repels you away. That could be very heartbreaking for someone. And then you're in a worse situation than you were before you met the person. I just want you to think. Think about what you're doing and the moves that you make. Think about why you're wanting a relationship. What do you want it for? What is the reason for it if you're thinking that you want a relationship? Why? And currently, do you do anything that can keep your mind off of that? Are you actively enhancing yourself, your skills? Are you actively learning? You know, because do you take time to learn about relationships? Do you learn anything about them? Because that would be good for someone who keeps on meeting the same energy in different bodies because they haven't learned their lesson yet. If you feel like you're someone who meets the same twisted energy in a different body over and over again, so it's time for you to educate yourself about relationships and to recognize the signs when it comes to someone who is not for you quickly, instead of being in the relationship for a long extended period and that person wasn't for you from the get-go. Okay, so educate yourself about relationships if you want to be in one. How about do that? So then at least when you, even what questions to ask. What do you want to know about a person? And then it's like, why do you want to know it? And then there's also like timing too. There's like so much. I mean, you don't want to be too rigid when you're getting to know someone. However, you do want to get to know them if you're looking at them as a potential person for you to be with. especially if you want to have a happy, healthy relationship. When it comes to the tough topics, I feel like, especially nowadays, people don't talk about them. They just continue on talking about shallow things. And then, before you know it, they get in too deep and things just go left. So before you get there, do some research for yourself. Get to know yourself more to even understand what it is that you want in a relationship. Make sure you know what you want and you're not just aimlessly just wanting to attach to a person just out of loneliness, because that could be dangerous for you and the other person, really. Let me see. I have the cross came out. This is just giving, it's better for you to be with someone who has a similar understanding, especially when it comes to spirituality, or if you're a religious person, like wherever you are, because if someone tries to pull you away from your belief system for the worst reasons, not to improve you in your life, but to break you down and control you, that is no bueno. That's no good. So be mindful of that as well. Don't allow yourself to submit to someone who is just into control and not edifying and loving, nurturing, and truly growing together. Because sometimes you can get into relationships with people that want to control you, but they don't even know how to control themselves, and then that's just all crazy. Okay? So just keep all of these things in mind. Okay? Think about them before you move forward. This nose of mine. Anyway, I hope this message gets to who needs to hear it. Everything you do, do it with love. Always remember that the Creator is in you and the magic is too, because you're magic. Much love to you. I'll see you in the next video.